Guy grabbed me by the shoulder, said, "You're under arrest."
Is the current president guilty of the kind of insurrection they attempted to charge President Trump with? January 6th, a date that the mainstream lying legacy corporate corrupt media, along with the Democrats on Capitol Hill, are determined to make sure lives in infamy, at least in their own revisionist view of history, and in this sense, their concocted view of events and history. I've said before, I will say it again. It was the most chill insurrection I have ever witnessed. They did not get anywhere near the video images that they really needed to have in order to pull off what it was they were trying to pull off. An out-of-office president being impeached for inciting an insurrection, a riot. As the evidence came out, they were trying to talk about how this was all planned and coordinated online, which means it would have happened before January the 6th. The president was not involved in any of those so-called electronic exchanges. And the fact that from his speech on January the 6th, was he there like a coach firing up his team? Absolutely. Was he telling millions of Americans who felt like that their voice was being ignored and their vote was being cast aside, that there were problems with the previous election and they wanted a fair analysis to be done to actually look into the charges rather than courts just dismissing them out of hand, not even listening, not even looking, not even investigating? Absolutely. But what did the president say? We will march up there together, peacefully making our voices heard. That is an exact quote. That is what he said. Obviously, there were those in the group that day that had other ideas. Now, we can sit here and we can break it down and we can analyze and we can ask as they get ready to hold this farce of a hearing on grilling the Capitol Police, and you see who Nancy Botox Pelosi has picked to be put in charge of the so-called internal investigation of what happened to security that day. The guy that they have picked looks like a Cuban Castro knockoff wannabe, a retired general who is an absolute loon, who right from day one said the Capitol Police were in on it. It was an inside job, and no doubt there were many Republican congressmen and senators who were a part of the plot as well. This was what he was tweeting out. This was what he was putting out on his own social media outlets. Not a shred of evidence, but this was what he was alleging. And now we're supposed to believe that he can go into this investigation fair and impartial, that he won't be concocting evidence and simply declaring a narrative and then trying to find what he needs to support it. You know, in preaching, there are guys that have ideas, things that they want to preach. And so they go to the Bible with a predetermined position. This is what I believe. And then they try to find scripture to fit what they already believe and to fit what it is they're trying to say, or they will make the verses try to fit what it is they're trying to say. When in reality, we're supposed to come to the Word of God and let the Word of God tell us what it's trying to say and then explain it to people. There's a huge difference in between going where the evidence leads you or you leading the evidence to a destination you have already determined. And that is exactly what this farce of investigation of what happened on June 6th is going to be. Because let's get real. Nancy Botox Pelosi had 10,000 National Guard troops at her disposal. Why? Because President Trump had called them in. Why? Because when millions of people assemble, there could be potential for problems. And President Trump acknowledges that, realizes that. It's what he wanted to do all summer, to quell the violence in our cities. But no, he was told he couldn't. Even former military leaders said, how dare the president even insinuate that we would use soldiers on American soil during quote-unquote peaceful protests. Wait. Where are these same voices now that Washington, D.C. looks like North Korea? You realize we have more federal troops guarding Washington, D.C. We have a greater military presence in Washington, D.C. than in Russia in the city of Moscow. You realize that, right? You realize the military, in a sense, is controlling a strong portion of our government and the appearance. You get that, right? You get the fact that we had to get rid of the orange man because he's a totalitarian authoritarian. Really? Not really. We never had a more rockin' economy than we did under Donald J. Trump, and we were never freer than we were under Donald J. Trump. Like it, lump it, take it for whatever it is, we were free under Donald Trump. You didn't like what he tweeted? Don't read it. Didn't like what he had to say? Turn him off. But we were free, and we had a rockin' economy. We are about to hit inflation, the likes of which you have never seen, when all this fake pretend stimulus money hits the economy. Watch out, baby. You remember the Jimmy Carter years and the misery index? Those of you that don't remember it but heard about it, you're about to live it, honey. We're watching gas prices go up, and that is just the start, because that's going to affect food. That's going to affect everything. And that's just the start. And on top of that, you are watching your freedoms being limited and erased, and only now approved speech is protected speech. Were the powers that be on Capitol Hill that day wanting there to be violence, wanting that visual optic so that they could end Trump and his legacy once and for all? Absolutely. Because Nancy Pelosi could have called in the National Guard at any point and did not. In fact, a stand-down order was given to police, and they were told to just allow the people in. I have talked to dozens of witnesses who were there, and they said, Pastor, we got along great with the police, and the minimal military presence that was there that you would expect to see in the capital city, and everybody was talking, everything was friendly, and we were not denied access anywhere. We were welcomed in. The initial videos of the so-called Capitol breach show that the people were welcomed up onto the steps of the Capitol. Wait a minute. No, they weren't. Yeah, they were. Then after they assembled enough people up there for the optic, then the gates were closed. And the people that you see pushing, trying to get in, did you ever think that when it hit the fan, people were trying to get out? I mean, the outside people who were there, who began to get reports on their cell phones that something was happening inside the building that they had no part in, didn't want to be accused of, and wanted out. And then all of a sudden, though they were allowed in, they were then surrounded and not allowed out. Bump-a-dum-bump. But I digress. When you watch the video footage of these so-called insurrectionists in the Capitol building, they're walking around. They look like junior hires on a field trip. They're staying inside the velvet ropes. They're pointing at pictures. They're taking pictures of themselves in the Capitol. They were like tourists on vacation. Even Chewbacca Man, the dude with the big horns, walking into the sacred chamber. And he walked up to where Nancy Botox Pelosi has her gavel and her false teeth and she makes her decrees from. And he stood up there for a moment, and a Capitol Police officer said, listen, that's reserved for the Speaker of the House, and this really is a sacred chamber. I need you to step down. And the dude was like, okay, yeah, man. And he came down. He was joking with the police officer as he walked out. They didn't set fire to anything. They weren't burning anything. They weren't giving us the visual optic that they wanted us to have. And then the so-called attack on their private offices, as outlined by AOC, turned out to be some were Capitol Police rounding up senators and congressmen to safety, and then finding out they were in a whole separate building where there were no insurrectionists. So a lot of it is AOC's figment of her imagination. We have a dead officer, and that's tragic. Why is he dead? Why have we not seen any of the security footage? Remember, Washington, D.C. has more cameras per square inch than a Las Vegas casino. So why don't we have a suspect? Why don't we have the narrative yet? Is it because the video is so bad and incriminating that it could point to, dare I suggest, even hint at, ask what you're thinking? Inside job. Another officer took his own life. Why? What did he know? Was he worried? Was somebody worried he might open his mouth and become a whistleblower? So we drum up this canard of, we've got to ferret out this extreme views in our military and police. So you, me, we become the enemy. It's a flashback to the Obama years. It was Bush who gave us the so-called Patriot Act, where we could spy on the terrorists meaning to do America harm. And Barack Obama took that to the next level. That meant you and me. It's exactly what Edward Snowden tried to point out, reading our emails, listening to our cell phone conversations. Now policing us online, deplatforming us, watching us, keeping us off planes if we flew to Washington as a Trump supporter. But the very thing that Chewbacca Man and these other people are being charged with, this insurrection, well, Joe Biden actually did it and was arrested for it.
What was that like, walking into the great Senate chamber at 29 years old?
You know, I walked in when I was 21, and I got arrested. It was a Saturday. I was down visiting some friends at Georgetown University, and I came up on a Saturday morning because I was fascinated with the Senate. And they had a Saturday session. I walked up those days, no guards stopping you everywhere, and they just got out of session. I walked in the back. All of a sudden, I found myself in the chamber, and I was stunned. I walked up, sat down, the presiding officer's seat. Guy grabbed me by the shoulder, said, "You're under arrest." All of a sudden, I found myself in the chamber, and I was stunned. I walked up, sat down, the presiding officer's seat. Guy grabbed me by the shoulder, said, "You're under arrest." Guy grabbed me by the shoulder, said, "You're under arrest. You're under arrest. You're under arrest. You're under arrest." Guy grabbed me by the shoulder, said, "You're under arrest."
Whoa, 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 whoa. The whole reason we were trying to do a so-called impeachment against the former president was he can never run for office again. He's an insurrectionist. Well, here's a guy that was actually arrested for being where he wasn't supposed to be in the Capitol, and he became a senator, and a vice president, and a president. I mean, if you listen to what he's saying, it is no different than what some of those lunkheads did on January the 6th. So now we have a former insurrectionist, an admitted insurrectionist, who was actually arrested. And I'm using, this is their definition of all of this now. Merrick Garland is Biden's nominee to be Attorney General. And he got his grilling on Capitol Hill, and he was asked point blank that if what happened in the Capitol on January the 6th rises to quote-unquote domestic terrorism, what does he have to say about BLM and Antifa and all of these rioters that were doing things in the streets of our cities and even setting fire to courthouses? Are they domestic terrorists?
Let me ask you about assaults on federal property in places other than Washington, D.C., Portland, for instance, Seattle. Do you regard assaults on federal courthouses or other federal property as acts of domestic extremism, domestic terrorism?
Well, Senator, my own definition, which is about the same as the statutory definition, is the use of violence or threats of violence in an attempt to disrupt democratic processes. So an attack on a courthouse while in operation, trying to prevent judges from actually deciding cases, that plainly is domestic extremism, domestic terrorism. An attack simply on government property at night or any other kind of circumstances is a clear crime and a serious one and should be punished. I don't know enough about the facts of the example you're talking about, but that's where I draw the line. One is both are criminal, but one is a core attack on our democratic institutions.
Oh, so as long as you do this stuff after office hours, basically at night, it's okay. All right, good to know. Thanks for the inside dope there, Garland. We appreciate the heads up. He was then asked to definitively say if crossing the border into this country illegally is a crime. Now, this is not a question that requires a great deal of thought. It doesn't matter how you feel about, on a personal level, illegal immigration, if you think they ought to all be granted amnesty and allowed to stay here. As the law is actually constructed, is someone who crosses into our country uninvited, without documentation, what's the word I'm groping for here? Illegally, is that a crime? Well, one would think, well, duh, but Merrick Garland, he's not quite sure.
Talk a little bit more about the law enforcement challenges at the border, which I know a number of other members have brought up with you. Just a fundamental question. Do you believe that illegal entry at America's border should remain a crime?
Well, I haven't thought about that question. I just haven't thought about that question. I think the president has made clear that we are a country of with the borders and with a concern about national security. I don't know of a proposal to decriminalize but still make it unlawful to enter. I just don't know the answer to that question. I haven't thought about it.
Will you continue to prosecute unlawful border crossings?
Well, this is again a question of allocation of resources. We will, the department will prevent unlawful crossing. I don't know. I have to admit, I just don't know exactly what the conditions are and how this is done. I think if I don't know what the current program even is with respect to this. I assume that the answer would be yes, but I don't know what the.
And this is Joe Biden's pick to be Attorney General, which leads me to say only one word: wow. Let me say that again: wow. I had to say it a second time because I like the way it sounded. Wow. Do as I say, not as I do. So, if you think the so-called impeachment was over insurrection and protecting the government, blah. It was another attempted takedown of Donald J. Trump to keep him down and make sure that no one like him ever runs again. Just like the pandemic isn't about your health, honey. It's about control. Why Dr. Fauci Stein is out there Sunday saying that we would be in masks till 2022. Today he's out there saying stay out of indoor dining and don't go to movie theaters. Way to go, Fauci. Way to keep killing business. I have been going in restaurants since the pandemic happened. I have been going in movie theaters since they reopened in July. I have been in congregate gatherings, church services, the entire time. I have even had members of my family who tested positive for COVID. I have been around it. I have been in rooms with people who really had a bad case of COVID, the flu. And I didn't get it. Because again, Fauci isn't really interested in our health. Otherwise, he would be telling us there are things that you can do to enhance your own natural immune system. I take my vitamin C, vitamin D every day. I've added B12 to it, and occasionally a little elderberry extract. I haven't had as much as a cold this winter. And I'm not saying that as a bragamony. God gave us an incredible creation called the human body. And any of you that are under the delusion that it was an evolutionary result, take one look at yourself and realize there is too much intricacy, too much detail for this to have happened by happen chance and a cosmic explosion or cosmic fart, if you will. We are by divine design. And it's amazing. He has built within the human body the ability to fight off infection, fight off virus, fight off sickness. And people who really are susceptible, who have a compromised immune system, may need to take extra precautions. That's only sanity. But to inflict mass incarceration on all of us by stripping us of our freedom, all in the name of so-called health, is nothing more than a power grab, just like what they're doing on Capitol Hill. And Biden is making it very clear, or I should say the people that pull Biden's strings. These cabinet people that he's rolling out, these are going to be the kind of people that will fall in complete lockstep with the new agenda. You know, the funny thing is Trump never got that luxury, did he? How many of his own picks turned out to work against him? You wondered what authoritarian totalitarianism was going to look like in America? You've got a front row seat. Hey, that's it for this rant. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you give us a thumbs up and a like. Share this to your social media platforms. Make sure you're still a subscriber to the channel. You know, YouTube has a tendency to purge my subscribers. They are really throttling back the algorithm on my channel. You either have to know I exist because you can't find me in a search, so check us out over on Rumble.